Now, let's get creepy. The United Kingdom, with its abandoned castles and ancient cemeteries, has been called the most haunted country in the world. But of all the spooky stories, it's a 30-year-old VHS tape that recently captured the world's attention. It's summer 1991 in Barnby Place, Bradford, UK. 15-year-old Adam Mawson has been using a camcorder to record his house when no one's home, in an effort to document some strange recent happenings. And on one of the tapes, Adam finds something frightening. Nothing seems amiss until a shadowy figure slowly begins to emerge from the chair. Look closely. It eventually rises and moves about the room, passing behind the door frame before returning and seemingly disappearing through the wall. Moments later, a second figure appears from the right and follows closely behind the other into the wall.
I was scared to death because I thought, what the hell is that? And that's when I showed my parents it, and my mum said, oh yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen it with her own eyes.
And to journalist Alexis Brooks, it sounds like a classic haunted house tale.
Barnby Place ranks among one of the most haunted places that I have ever seen. I mean, you're talking about disembodied voices, doors opening, closing on their own, and even what I would call a shadow person phenomenon.
Shadow people are described as dark silhouettes with human shapes and profiles. These shadowy creatures are sometimes interpreted as the presence of a spirit or other entity. Others believe these figures to be negative beings that can be repelled by various means, including invoking the name of Jesus.
I have seen and heard so many accounts of what we call the shadow person phenomenon. Many reports of shadow people include harassing an individual in their bedroom. So I would dare say that in addition to the more conventional haunting, we have what I would call a shadow person phenomenon going on in that home.
A figure often associated with shadow people is the Hat Man, a famous urban legend who wears a dark coat, a hat, and is unusually tall. Sometimes the figure is thought to be the devil himself. Adam's father still lives in the house on Barnby Place and says the activity has died down since he found religion. But that only seems to confirm that perhaps something spiritual was going on. Our experts take a closer look. First, we head to forensic video analyst Michael Primo for an authenticity check of this digitized copy.
We're not able to identify it as an actual ghost through forensic testing, but it could be the product of when the video was processed between the time that it was produced on tape to this digital version as some sort of artifact that is concealed as the object travels by, but is it CGI? Less likely.
So this footage probably wasn't manipulated intentionally, but how about accidentally?
These shadowy figures don't appear to be something that was introduced into the recording based on the artifacts that are present throughout its movement. And because we see these shadowy figures over several seconds in multiple instances, it's more likely something that actually happened in the video images.
So this recording itself may not have been manipulated, but we are not ready to declare this a ghost. We turn to physicist Dr. Matthew Shadagis, who suspects something shady.
What we're seeing here is this dark figure or shadow seeming to pass into the left wall and disappear, which would favor the ghost explanation. However, if you look very carefully over these few frames, there is some pixel darkening on the left that would seem to indicate that the shadow goes over the wall as we'd expect for a normal shadow being cast by someone off camera. It does not fully explain all the subtle motions we see, such as when the shape rises out of the chair, but it's the most plausible non-ghost explanation that I can come up with.
Primo disagrees and doesn't see any evidence that the shadow was created by someone off camera.
If the shadow was produced by the operator that's standing behind the camera, we would expect to see more of that cast off on the regions surrounding the doorway. But it's not produced over here on the right side of the image. These darker regions, being some sort of shadow is not really possible with the way that we don't see that information on the doorway.
So if we're ruling out shadows of someone off camera, could this truly be a ghost? Some say physics itself is all the proof you need of life after death, because the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. We bring that theory to Dr. Shadagas.
This is a misinterpretation of what conservation of energy means. The very notion of conservation of energy comes from energy changing form. And a great example of this energy exchange occurs after we have passed away and our body decomposes. Gases and other elements will feed the worms after we've died. Therefore, we cannot use an argument like conservation of energy from physics in order to prove or disprove life after death.
So, it seems current science still can't attest to the existence of ghosts. But as of now, we can't explain this video any other way. Our verdict? This video is a bona fide case of unexplained phenomena, over 30 years running. It's 1994 at the Nevada Test and Training Range. It's used for flight tests, aerial gunnery, even nuclear tests. Today, an Air Force tracking station in the desert is monitoring the airspace above the top secret site when its remote-controlled cameras capture something that has no business being there.
Unknown object, aircraft some type. It seems to be hovering there.
These 12 minutes of video were captured by remote-controlled cameras from the Nellis Air Force Base. And what they show you is fascinating.
The video was shot with a camera that amplifies the light from the stars and the moon to make it appear almost as bright as day. You can see in the time code that it was 11:21 p.m. That's the moon causing the bright lens flare while the operators zoom in on the object.
It appears to be a craft of undefined shape and origin that's moving erratically in a pattern that wouldn't be explained by the aircraft technology available at the time.
The readout in the upper right of the frame measures the object's distance from the camera.
We'll call this a kill on its unknown aircraft. T1 control doesn't know what type of aircraft it is either.
The object moves slowly above the horizon and then soars upward.
This object doesn't appear to have any wings or rotor blades, and it appears to change shape in flight.
Yeah, it's outbound. It's moving fast. Did you stop it? Standby 13.
Now here's what takes the weird to that other level. Within the Nevada Test and Training Range is a high security area whose name has become synonymous with UFO theory, Area 51.
Area 51 is a military base. The military didn't actually acknowledge that it existed until the 2000s, I want to say. And many in the UFO community believe that it's a hotspot for testing on alien technology. So when it actually was confirmed to exist, it was a really big deal.
But here's the thing. If this was some top secret tech, domestic or alien, being flown out of Area 51, you'd think the operators would know something about what's going on. Instead, they sound completely confused, which suggests that whatever this is didn't have the clearance to be there. So what are we really looking at? Let's hand this over to our experts.
The object moves erratically in the sky, which suggests it's not an aircraft that we knew about at the time, such as a helicopter or a jet. The way it's moving is almost the way a drone would move, but drones didn't exist when this was captured.
So the object's movement rules out known aircraft, as does its odd shape. Let's zoom in. There's no sign of an engine or an exhaust trail.
That leads me to believe that what we're looking at here is powered potentially by cold gas thrusters, a technology that wasn't necessarily as well understood at the time, but it could be an early prototype for a modern drone.
Could it be that the tracking station picked up some kind of classified military project being researched in nearby Area 51?
Anytime you're doing really classified testing, you turn off your tracking cameras. So the fact that this was captured and recorded is very intriguing. All of that is inconsistent with what we'd expect with actual classified aerospace testing.
But Mick West takes a closer look. He doesn't think the object is moving much at all.
Whenever you see it moving and you can see something like a hill in the background, you'll see they both move together. So all the motion that we have in this particular video is just the motion of the camera. It's not really moving very rapidly in the scene, and it's not really turning or making any very abrupt moves. It's just kind of gently seeming to drift along and gently rotate.
Mark D'Antonio sees it the same way.
All the fast movements you see here are the camera itself moving to re-engage with the object and to see it. But it's not the object moving quickly. If you study the sky background and if you look at what is going on, you'll notice that the camera's doing all the moving.
And that leads both D'Antonio and West to a very earthly explanation.
It looks like a bunch of balloons, which is, an odd thing that you might not expect to see on a military training range, but there are small towns nearby. Someone could have just had a party and some balloons got loose, or it could have been something that they were experimenting with.
There have been balloon targets used before. Maybe this is what we're seeing here, but the folks on the base, they certainly weren't expecting this.
This is, unfortunately, is a case where we may never know what this object actually was, because this is the type of thing that the military either forgets about or they don't tell you about.
So based on that further observation of the object's motion and shape, we're going to say that this was some kind of balloon that meandered into the high-security airspace. But this incident was not mentioned in the government's recent UFO report. So what the Pentagon thinks of this remains a mystery. For more than 30 years, computer science professor Erling Strand has been traveling the Hessdalen Valley in his native Norway, spending countless hours investigating a mystery that no one can explain. It's a phenomenon so rare that not many have ever captured it on film. But when it happens, Erling's camera and tripod have been there to record these eerie images. One of Erling's videos, taken on December 4th, 1999, shows a pulsating, flickering light that appears above the horizon. Another video shows what appears to be a single mysterious pulsating light. When we zoom in, the shape, size, and intensity seem to be fluctuating as these lights travel high above the mountains.
There was no natural thing which could make these lights. I found that very little scientific information existed.
Close-up photographs reveal what appears to be an amorphous, gas-like substance. But what are they? The lights have been observed since the 1930s. But investigative journalist MJ Benaya says it was the period between December 1981 to mid-1984 when the scientific world really took notice.
What makes Hessdalen very interesting is we don't know if this is some sort of naturally occurring phenomena. We don't know if this is a man-made phenomena. And we also don't know if this could have some sort of otherworldly answer.
While sightings of the lights are not as frequent as they once were, this has not stopped ufologists from believing that the lights are signs of extraterrestrial activity.
Some people believe that due to mineral deposits or the location of a specific mountain or valley, that UFOs are drawn to it, or that valleys and mountains play host to sort of underground bases for UFO pilots.
But researchers have recently come up with a more earthly explanation. The unusual lights may be caused by a natural battery buried deep underground, created by metallic minerals reacting with sulfur in the river running between them.
The area itself is very rich in minerals. For a very long time, mining operations have existed in the area, predominantly for minerals like copper and zinc, and these lights could be somehow connected to the mining operations that occur in the valley.
Researchers are so determined to figure out this phenomenon that in 1998, a permanent station called the Blue Box began monitoring the valley with a magnetometer, 2 black and white cameras, and 1 color camera. Clearly something strange is going on there. But what? We asked our experts to weigh in. Physics professor Matthew Shadaga says that since teams of scientists have been studying this phenomenon for decades, they've had plenty of time to eliminate several of the more mundane explanations.
We've already ruled out car, airplane, helicopter, because those objects don't fit the description of these lights, which have different behaviors, blinking on and off, changing shape, changing color.
While Shadaga says that the natural battery theory makes sense, it's still just a theory.
the natural minerals in the area may develop positive and negative charges naturally, like in your everyday battery. So if you have a strong enough electric field, you might end up with what look like lights in the sky. The downside of the natural battery theory is these minerals are not necessarily next to each other. They're separated by the river in the area.
Astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio says another leading theory is that the lights are literally generated by the Earth.
The theory is that the lights are generated by some type of electrical energy coupled with some magnetic influences that ends up becoming visible in the air as naturally caused lights. In the same way that you scruff your feet on a carpet and touch something metal and you see a little spark between your finger and that metal thing, that might be able to occur on a larger scale. But I think that we're lacking information to say definitively what they are. So we don't know for sure exactly what we're seeing here. But it is a rather compelling video nonetheless.
Our verdict? We're calling this an unexplained phenomenon. While the theory that the geology of Norway is causing the Hessdalen lights is compelling, it is still only a theory. And it begets the question, why don't we see this battery effect around other similar geological areas? One thing is certain, more research is needed. And if you want to head to Norway to do it, they'll leave the lights on for you. It began in 1991 when a deep-water hydrophone like this first detected a sound emanating from 5,000 miles away, someplace in the Pacific Ocean, roughly halfway between Australia and South America. Let's listen to it again. The whoop, whoop sound ascends at the end. That's why it's known as the Upsweep. Now, the ocean is a noisy place. There's man-made machines, geological events like volcanoes and glaciers, and the sea life is much noisier than previously believed. With so much left to be discovered down there, journalist Alexis Brooks suggests the upsweep may be caused by some unknown sea beast.
There are many creatures that roam the sea that people felt were, in fact, myth until they were actually discovered. For instance, the giant squid. It is now known that it exists.
One thing is certain, the source of the upsweep has to be massive. So let's consider this candidate, the massive prehistoric shark known as the megalodon.
It's been established that the megalodon actually did exist, albeit 2.5 million years ago, with estimates of its length being in excess of 60 feet and weight upwards of 50 tons. However, there are people who feel that the megalodon still exists.
Could this recent photo be proof the megalodon is still alive? It shows a huge mako shark found by a fisherman off the coast of Australia, bitten in half.
You have to take a deep breath and say, what on God's green earth severed the shark? How big could that have been?
So the famous megalodon is one interesting potential source of the upsweep, but there are plenty of other theories about that strange sound. For answers, we turn first to our expert on ocean life. Marine biologist Dr. Shay Conger starts by tackling the megalodon theory.
It's unlikely that megalodons are still in our oceans because of the fact that shark teeth are continually shed through the animal's life. There's never been a current specimen of a megalodon tooth that's ever been found.
And as for that chewed up mako shark,
if this were attacked by a megalodon, it likely could have been swallowed completely whole. Instead, what you see are several very large semicircular bite marks, including some teeth rakes. What this tells me is that this animal suffered a number of bite wounds.
likely during a feeding frenzy by other sharks. But something is making that sound, and if it's not the megalodon, what is it? Audio expert Dr. Ben Gottesman is struck by the sound's intensity, focusing on the stunning fact that it was first detected at a distance of 5,000 miles.
That's what makes me think it's some very large, very intense seismic sound.
So let's listen to the sound of an underwater volcano. Note that it trails off at the end. Now the upsweep. Again, the signature ascension. This doesn't match anything seismic. So what about a man-made source, like the machinery used for offshore oil drilling?
Pile drivers or different machines in the ocean have a more mechanically spaced, more stereotypical, impulsive sound. That's not what we see here.
Because the upsweep varies, Conger says it's likely the sound was made by an animal, but with a catch.
The upsweep is a sound that we have as yet attributed to any species of marine mammal. The upsweep doesn't currently match any of these profiles.
Humpback whale sounds can travel thousands of miles, just like the upsweep. But again, none match its acoustic profile. So you see why it's remained a mystery for so long. Every possible explanation doesn't quite fit. But we agree with Dr. Conger. Our verdict? A very large, unidentified marine mammal